Harvey Glanville, one of Alice's sons, is going to come now and share the eulogy with us. Harvey, please.
First, on behalf of the family, I would like to acknowledge the many thoughtful tributes that we've received over the past month. Thank you to everyone for your kind words. Also, this is my best opportunity to thank all those individuals who have stepped forward in our absence to assist us with the organization of this memorial. I want you to know how much it's appreciated by Mom's family. Our family's roots have been well established in Grand Forks for over a century, and returning here to visit our parents, as we had been doing for nearly 50 years, never lost its appeal. It seems strange that this is now a destination without the family home and the warm reception that always came from our parents. The entire spectrum of Alice's life appears to be represented at this congregation, and your presence is recognized as a compliment to our mother. Our family has been blessed with Mom's long, healthy, and rewarding life. Besides being missed by her family, our mother's passing also means the loss of a friend, colleague, and confidant, leaving a void in this community. Therefore, this memorial is essentially about celebrating the life of an individual for whom we all have our own special love and admiration. Alice Ethel Clark was born on April 30th, 1920, in the small boundary community of Midway. She was the third of 8 children for her parents, Walter and Ethel Clark. Our mother was predeceased by her husband, Jim, in 2008, brothers Jack, Fred, and Jim, and sisters May and Betty. She is survived by her 3 sons, Harvey, Ross, and Clark, and their respective families, which includes 5 grandchildren, Brooke, Shane, Lindsay, Sean, and Ryan, and 8 great-grandchildren. Alice also leaves behind her 2 youngest sisters, Jean and Sheila, and sister-in-law Iris. Alice's first home was located at Norwegian Creek, a small pocket of residences between Greenwood and Midway. The family moved to Greenwood shortly thereafter, Anaconda to be more precise, and she grew up and went to elementary and junior high school in that community. The livelihood of the family depended on the mining industry, the garden harvest on the banks of nearby Boundary Creek, and the older children taking on responsibilities. There was also a reciprocal reliance on the neighborhood social network, as these were lean and frugal times. Grades 11 and 12 were completed in Grand Forks, where Mom boarded with Alf and Bess Price, who became dear family friends. After graduating from high school in 1937, Alice attended the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. The following year, she enrolled in what was known at that time as normal school to complete her teacher training. At the tender age of 19, Mom's teaching career commenced in 1939 at the one-room Brown Creek School on the North Fork, the beginning of her influence as a lifetime educator in the Grand Forks area. She boarded at the home of Margaret and Howard Bryant and often commuted to Greenwood on weekends by walking the Kettle Valley Railroad to Eholt, where her brother Jack picked her up. Brown Creek dances at the school brought the North Fork community together, and this is where Alice first met Jim. A desperate need for filling wartime jobs on the home front lured Alice away from her teaching assignment, and she ended up in Montreal in 1941, spending much of the next 2 years working in a gun factory. With a youthful spirit for adventure, she took an opportunity during this time to tour the Maritimes on bicycle with a group of co-workers, including longtime family friend Peggy Murdoch. Also, Mom had the good fortune, at least from my perspective, of seeing Le Club de Hockey Canadien play at the old Montreal Forum when Maurice Rocket Richard was in his rookie year. Alice and Jim were married in October 1943, and with that was a commitment to the dairy business that our father had recently purchased from his dad. By 1948, the family had grown to 5 with the arrival of 3 sons. Our mom was a devoted mother and homemaker, and there are many colorful memories of her that stand out as we grew up on the North Fork family farm. Mom always did what she thought was best for the health of her family, but found out that the daily ration of wheat germ could not be concealed by the porridge. Cod liver oil did not enhance the flavor of the orange juice, and parsnips were impossible to disguise as carrots. On the tastier side, peanut butter cookies were a favorite standby, jelly rolls were a specialty item, and huckleberry pies were the reward from family berry picking outings. And then there was the weekly batch of homemade bread, 6 loaves at a time. Like many people of their generation, our parents were quite self-reliant, and Mom could stretch the food budget by making effective use of homegrown vegetables, poultry, dairy produce, farm-fed beef, and even venison. At that time, the wood stove was the only source of heat and cooking, beside which was a small galvanized tub for our bath. An ice box served as a refrigerator, cooled in the summer with ice that had been harvested from Smelter Lake the previous winter and preserved in sawdust. With the family living alongside the Glanville River, our mother really wanted us to learn to swim, and she would often take her boys down to the river and have to put up with us complaining about the rocky bottom, the strong current, and the cold water. The threat of the wooden spoon kept 3 boys in line, and we knew that when one of us was asked to get the spoon out of the drawer, it was time for the other 2 to clear out. Labor Day celebrations in Greenwood were traditional family outings, and I remember Mum being a dominant force in the ladies' egg and spoon race. Despite living in a rural environment, our mother sought out opportunities for her family to access cultural events, recreational activities, and social gatherings, driving us into town in the Comet station wagon. A substitute teacher was hard to come by in the early 50s, and without phone service to the North Fork, the superintendent of schools, Bill Brown, would occasionally drive out to the farm to enlist Mom's services as a replacement teacher. When phone service was eventually extended up the valley, we could be reached by dialing 33X. In 1955, Alice returned to teaching full-time at the secondary school in Grand Forks, where she taught English and social studies. For 7 years, beginning in 1960, Mom attended summer school sessions at UBC and ultimately received her Bachelor of Education degree in 1967, majoring in library science. This was a big commitment for our mother, and we, as teenagers, had to assume numerous household and farm responsibilities, while our father turned out to be very competent in the kitchen. I can appreciate now how demanding her job was, and why it was worth $2 to her for me to run the laundry through the wringer washer and hang the clothes on the line to dry. Alice then served as librarian at Grand Forks Secondary School until her retirement from teaching in 1980. In the meantime, the family farm had been sold, and our parents bought some acreage and built a new home, this time on the banks of the Kettle River in West Grand Forks. After her boys left home and pursued their own lives, our mother turned her focus to other personal interests and community service. The nest didn't stay empty very long, though, as Mom and Dad boarded nephews Sean and Mitchell Higashi to enable them to attend high school at Grand Forks Secondary. Mom liked to be active. She and Dad would often be seen together on their bikes. They spent many years together as members of the local curling club and were very involved with square dancing. Mom had a regular routine at the aquatic center, and in winter she enjoyed touring around the adjacent fields on her cross-country skis. Our parents lived in this home for the next 40 years, which was essentially country living with close proximity to all their activities, and where they formed some special relationships with neighbors. After completing her tenure as a teacher, Alice's commitment to education continued with the school district, as she served in the capacity of school trustee for the next 19 years. She worked on nearly every committee during this period and held the position of chairperson for 10 years. She also assumed a number of roles with the BC School Trustees Association and became well-versed with troubleshooting delicate issues. In reading some of her correspondence, hearing comments from her colleagues, and listening to Mom's own revelations, it is very evident that her position as a trustee required extraordinary commitment. Mom also spent 20 years as a marriage commissioner, performing ceremonies in rather unique locations, such as the top of Observation Mountain, in a houseboat on Christina Lake, and on the Phoenix Ski Hill. I'm guessing that she likely conducted marriage vows for some of you in the congregation. Definitely. Other community service involvement included 5 years as a representative on the Boundary Health Council, as a committed advocate and volunteer with the local public library, and as a primary resource person for the Grand Forks Museum. Alice also had an interest in the Archival Society, where she assisted with the preservation of artifacts, heritage sites, and historical records. In her early retirement years, Alice pursued an interest in travel, learning more about the history, culture, and politics of other parts of the world, usually as part of an educational tour group. Extensive trips to the former Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China were a couple of highlight visits. Other destinations included trips to the United Kingdom, a couple of journeys to South and Central America, and a cruise to Antarctica. Mom wasn't able to convince Dad to travel beyond his comfort zone, so she ventured out on her own to these foreign destinations. However, Mom and Dad did travel together throughout Canada, reaching its extremities in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, Churchill on Hudson Bay, Bella Coola on the west coast, and Inuvik in the Arctic. They toured extensively throughout British Columbia, enjoying the many heritage sites and visiting friends and family. They also loved to explore beyond the confines of the well-traveled routes, enjoying some of the more remote locations on backcountry roads. Wherever one looked in Mom's home, there was plenty of evidence that she liked to read. The volumes of books, periodicals, and newspapers revealed a lot about Alice's interests, from literary classics to political editorials, and most significantly, historical journalism. The National, with Knowlton Nash, Lloyd Robertson, or Peter Mansbridge, was a 10 p.m. ritual, and Mom rarely retired for the night before 11 p.m. Alice also enjoyed reading the daily newspaper, and the crossword page was usually left open at the top of the pile, exuding evidence of confidence, as it was always done in ink. Mom might have been a generation removed from the computer literate age, but that didn't prevent her from embracing the new technology to source her research, word process her documents, and most importantly, communicate via email. More recently, emails were the sole reason for having her computer, as she would check daily to see if anyone had sent her a message. If this is to be a highlight reel of Alice's life, I would be remiss in not mentioning her lifelong interest in politics. This first became evident to me back in the mid-50s, when Lois Hagan, boundary candidate for what was then the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation Party, visited our parents on the farm while out on the campaign trail. This was the beginning of what would become a very enduring friendship. And the volumes of Gazette clippings that surfaced when we downsized Mom's belongings reinforced this relationship. I recently asked Mom who she thought was the most influential person in her life, other than Dad, of course, and it came as no surprise when she said Tommy Douglas, knowing that his progressive social values resonated with her. Mom never hesitated to extol the virtues of other well-known politicians of her affiliation, such as the likes of Stephen Lewis, Dave Barrett, and Jack Layton. Mom's tenure with the BC School Trustees Association saw her work in partnership with Carol James, and common historical interests initiated a friendship with local author, historian, and politician Bill Barlee. Even on the municipal front, Alice was always absorbed with issues, many of which surfaced while engaged in conversation with her good friend and confidant, Laurie Lum. With Mom, political boundaries never interfered with family and friendships, service obligations, or personal advocacy, yet politics was an integral part of her life. Alice had been connected to a large network of people through her work, associations, neighbors, and even casual acquaintances. Her address book was very encompassing, which translated into extensive correspondence, especially at Christmas time. As a family, we would like to acknowledge those people who have been so kind and helpful to Mom, especially in more recent years, which we all know are times of need. that friendship and caring were valued. The door was always open to visitors at the Glanville home, and laughter, good food, and great conversation were shared at the dining room table. Our mother was never one to place any demands on or have expectations of her family. She was so accepting and matter-of-fact about circumstances. This didn't remove any doubt that she cherished being with family and looked forward to get-togethers on special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, and Christmas. Mom had a great reciprocal relationship with her grandchildren, whom she adored, and they were a source of pride, focus of her conversation, and recipients of her generosity. As generations advanced, Mom more recently began to focus attention on her great-grandchildren, an additional source of joy, times 8. Over the years, our family has learned not to call Mom between 9 and 10 in the evening. Reason? She was likely to be on the phone with her sister Jean. These nightly calls were much anticipated and meant a lot to her mother. The sisters had quite a mutual understanding as they confided in each other about personal issues, enjoyed each other's humor, and shared anecdotes. For those of us who knew Mom on a more personal basis, there are a few qualities, quirks, and quotes that were typically Alice. For someone who was always so well organized, we often wondered how Mom managed using the backs of envelopes, newspaper margins, and napkins for her notes and phone messages. This leads to one of her most often used expressions, especially in more recent times. If it isn't written down, it doesn't exist. Maybe a metaphor of her life pursuits. I wouldn't deny that Mom could be outspoken, strong-willed, and unbending at times, but invariably she could justify her stance. There were very few things that our mother ever complained about. However, there are a few that jump out. With reference to maintaining her gravel parking lot, Mom would often say, "I do not like to weed rocks." She was not a water drinker and could not be persuaded differently. She had a lifetime aversion to porridge. Our Mom was not impressed with the ride Space Mountain at Disneyland, where she took all her family on a vacation about 25 years ago. Finally, and somewhat appropriately, she did not have much tolerance for narrow-mindedness. The summer following Mom's 90th birthday, Carla and I drove her back to Grand Forks after she had come to Williams Lake for a family visit. The first thing she did when she got in the door was to check her phone messages. Here is a sample of what we heard. It went something like this. "Alice, Don Caskey here, just checking in with a reminder that you are still on the agenda for a presentation at our next Retired Teachers Association meeting. Hello, Alice. It's Leader Husoff at the board office. Can we check with you about a backdated district policy before it goes on the next school board meeting agenda? Good morning, Alice. Ron Wellwood calling from Nelson. I wanted to chat with you about an item in the minutes from our recent BC Historical Society AGM. Alice, it's Betty Ann. Just wanted to let you know that we have everything set up for your slideshow at the next Coffee Clutch meeting. So, what did all this mean? Besides consolidating any insight that we may have already had about Mom's activity schedule. This was her life, a commitment to service, sharing her expertise, and enjoying the social network of others who had similar interests. I think it would be safe to say that Alice's most influential contribution resulted from her dedication to sharing and preserving the history of the Boundary Country. She was instrumental in preparing much of the historical content that has been featured in the first 15 editions of the Boundary Historical Reports. Alice always researched her information, and in so doing, was a credible source of historical knowledge and a reliable go-to person. She attended many AGMs throughout the province for the BC Historical Federation and served as president for 3 years, from 1994 to 1996, later becoming an honorary life member of this provincial organization. Alice's historical journalism expanded with the publication of her first book, Schools of the Boundary, in 1991, chronicling a detailed history of 100 years of education in BC's Boundary District. This publication led to a feature article in BC Women's Magazine, a Provincial Heritage Award, and the Governor-General's Commemorative Medal for community service. The passion for local history was also shared by her father, and together, Alice and Jim Glanville co-authored 2 historical books about Grand Forks in conjunction with centennial celebrations. In the Shadow of Observation, written in 1987, takes the reader through a nostalgic journey of the community's past. And Grand Forks, where the Kettle River flows, published in 1997, is a revelation of the life and times of the people and events that have carved their niche in the Sunshine Valley. This was a very strong, effective, and dutiful partnership, which was recognized in 1998 when our parents were both cited as freemen of the city of Grand Forks. Another tribute followed in 2003 with the dedication of the Integrated Services Facility as the Glanville Center, which serves the needs of young people in the area, the same building in which Alice and Jim graduated from high school. It's been 7 years since we lost our father, a few days short of our parents' 65th wedding anniversary. Mom and Dad had a wonderful relationship that was manifested by mutual understanding, harmony, and compatibility. They always provided encouragement and support for each other, while at the same time respecting the other's independence. In recent years, Mom derived a lot of pleasure from relating certain events, stories, or anecdotes that she loved to repeat. One of these I will share, primarily because of the great relationship Mom and Dad had established with their longtime neighbors, Holly and Norm Borisenkoff. One day, there was a knock on our parents' door, and it was young Jordan from next door, there to tell Mrs. Glanville that they were out of cookies at his place. In the spring of 2011, Mom was beginning to sense that the responsibilities of managing the home on her own were starting to become a bit overwhelming and creating more of a burden. On top of that, she was experiencing some health issues that ultimately led to the downsizing and sale of her home. On November 1st, 2011, Carla and I drove to Grand Forks to scoop Mom up and take her to a new home in Salmon Arm. After spending 91 years of her life in the Boundary Country, we wondered how Mom would settle into her new place. But she was ready for this transition, and she adjusted to her new surroundings at Piccadilly Terrace quite nicely. Alice still confided in her close friends, continued to express her concerns about Grand Forks issues, especially the fate of the Grand Forks Museum, Public Library, and of course, the Boundary Historical Society. She made new friends at Piccadilly Terrace, enjoyed regular visits from her family, and jumped at any opportunity to go on a road trip. The Vancouver Sun was delivered to Mom's door daily. She looked forward to the weekly mailing of the Gazette. She continued to follow the news coverage on TV and checked her computer regularly to see if anyone had sent her an email. Mom liked to socialize over morning coffee and muffins in the Commons, looked forward to all the curling coverage during the winter months, and spent many hours sifting through the boxes of print material preserved from the past. Shortly after moving into Piccadilly Terrace, CBC Radio was able to track Mom down early one morning, looking to interview her for some historical information about the Grand Forks Hotel, which had burned down the night before. When it came time for her mother to move into extended care this past January, she was somewhat reticent about having to make new friends once again. It was quite remarkable that one of her new neighbors in the same wing happened to be her former neighbor on the North Fork farm 60 years ago, centenarian Mariana Bryant, Mariana Fisher at that time, and maiden name Rossi. Somehow, life seemed to have come full circle, and what a collection of original North Fork family names. So in summary, what would we consider to be the legacy attached to Alice Glanville? I would suggest that it be linked to stewardship, an obligation or duty to take care of something belonging to society and securing it for future generations. Good stewardship is about being faithful in using all your personal resources, not only money and possessions, but time and talents as well. Alice was very dedicated to the preservation of historical assets and she provided effective planning, guidance, and management of this community resource. There is no doubt that she had her opinions on a number of issues, some of which may have been controversial, but they were always researched, supported, and well thought out. If you wanted to get some background information, seek advice, or brainstorm an idea, you could always call Alice. Not only was she a pillar in her community, she was also a tower of strength in her family. The rewards were in the satisfaction of helping others and enriching the community, not for any accolades, self-serving intentions, or personal gain. The boundary was her domain. It was a place of deep pride, and our mother did her part to keep its heritage alive. When one puts everything in perspective, what stood out above all else is that Alice walked the talk. Along with our father, Mama has woven part of the fabric of this community, and she will be missed by her family and friends.